Okay, everybody, hello and welcome. We're excited to have you here. Thank you for joining us today. This is the special meeting of the Encinitas City Council. It is Wednesday, January 26, 2022 at 4 p.m. May we please have a roll call?
Yes, let the record show that all members are present, except for Councilmember Lindes, who was absent.
Okay, thank you. So we have one agenda item today. This is a special meeting to talk about our sheriff's contract. So this is a presentation by the San Diego County Sheriff's Department to the City Council and members of the Equity Committee regarding law enforcement services in the city. We will turn to our Assistant City Manager, Campbell, now to have a report.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Good afternoon, members of the public. Tonight, the recommended action is for City Council to hear the presentation from the San Diego County Sheriff's Department and also provide any feedback and possible direction. So just a little background, the City of Encinitas has contracted with the San Diego County Sheriff's Department since 1987. Our current law enforcement contract includes general law services, patrol, traffic, special purpose officers, school resource officers, community service officers, detectives, and rehired deputies for different special services. We currently are in a 5-year contract. Our contract ends on June 30th, 2022, which is this June. And we will be having the proposed contract come before City Council in the next month or so to be approved and considered. The city is part of a group called CLETAC, which is the Contract Law Enforcement Technical Advisory Committee, and it's made up of the 9 cities that we also contract with for sheriff services. Although we've not gotten a copy of the new proposed contract coming up, we do know a couple details. One of the details is it would be for another 5 years, and the contract would include increases, which we always have every year, and the increases range from 1% to 3.5% throughout the 5 years. So tonight, too, the Equity Committee is joining us in this discussion as they have shown interest in this specific topic as our City Equity Committee. I would like to now introduce the several members of the Sheriff's Department that will be joining us for the presentation. By phone, a little bit later, Kelly Martinez, the Undersheriff, will be joining us by phone. Currently on the phone is Dave Brown, the Assistant Sheriff. We also have Teresa Haidar-Adams, which is the Commander of Law Enforcement Services Support. We also have Captain Dustin Lopez, which is our captain at the North Coastal Sheriff Station. And we have with us Keith Spears, the Sheriff's Contract Manager. So I will turn the presentation and the attention over to the Sheriff's Department for the presentation. Thank you.
Afternoon, council members and members of the public. My name is Keith Spears. As he said, I am the Contracts and Grants Manager for the Sheriff's Department. And my primary responsibility is that I serve as the Sheriff's representative to the contract cities for the management and administration of our law enforcement contracts. So what I've been asked to do today is give you a brief overview of what contract city law enforcement is and a little bit of how we do the negotiations and how that part of the process works. Oops. Okay, so the sheriff has been contracting with cities for law enforcement services since 1959. Del Mar was the first city, and of the 9 cities, only Imperial Beach ever had its own police department. The other 8 cities all came on board, like Encinitas did, as they incorporated. Currently, we contract with the 9 cities: Del Mar, Encinitas, Imperial Beach, Lemon Grove, Poway, Santee, San Marcos, Solana Beach, and Vista. The contract works for everyone. The county benefits by having some extra staff, and the cities benefit from the economy of scale that a large agency can provide. Traditionally, we have done a 5-year agreement, and as the deputy clerk mentioned, the current agreement expires 6/30/22. We've been meeting with the cities for about a year to negotiate a new agreement. Our overall goal is to maintain the cooperative spirit of law enforcement, and we've always looked at this contract as a cooperative agreement between the cities that we provide services to and our Sheriff's Department. And yesterday, the County Board of Supervisors approved entering into a new 5-year contract with our cities. So we've got the go-ahead from them. So as she mentioned, the next thing that we will be doing is providing the individual cities with a copy of the contract, and then we'll be answering any questions they have, and then they can be taking it to their individual councils for approval. Now, what makes our situation unique from other counties, there are a lot of counties that contract out with law enforcement. LA County, for example, I believe has 42, 44 cities, is that our 9 cities negotiate as a group. So the cities appoint a negotiating committee. They try to pick somebody from one of the larger cities, somebody from the mid-sized cities, and somebody from one of the smaller cities. So the current committee is the city managers of Imperial Beach, Poway, and San Marcos. The county is represented by staff from the Contracts Division and the Law Enforcement Services Bureau. The cities all negotiate as a group, and this is an important thing, a distinction in our way of doing business that's different from everybody else. All terms and conditions apply to all cities, and only one contract form is used. So we don't have different forms of contract or different terms and conditions for different cities. Everybody has to agree to the same language. There are no separate side letters or agreements, as I indicated. And the only part of the contract document that varies by city is what we call Attachment B. And Attachment B is basically a list of what each individual city purchases from the department, your staffing levels, numbers of deputies, numbers of traffic deputies, motorcycle deputies, and that, of course, will vary by city. So that's the only part of the contract document that's different. So we have anticipated, somebody asked me about what is anticipated service outcomes. This is not a contract where we have matrices like you would see maybe in a healthcare contract where they would say you're going to reduce flu by 10% or you're going to vaccinate 80% of the population. We basically say that the outcome of law enforcement services is provided by the county through the sheriff to the city is the provision of efficient and effective police protection and the performance of all duties as required by law or contract. And then we list the different things that we do. We do patrol traffic, general and specialized investigations. That would be things such as, besides the normal burglaries and stuff, we have homicide and juvenile crimes, and we have crimes against children, and we belong to a number of task forces that provide different services. Crime prevention, crime analysis, criminal intelligence, narcotics enforcement, emergency services. We also do licensing, and we also provide the Regional Crime Lab. As a little piece of information for you, with the exception of the city of San Diego, we provide crime lab services to everybody in the county, including some state agencies. Now, on the staffing, the city can customize or tailor direct staffing to their need as long as the minimum staffing level is determined by the sheriff is meant to ensure deputy and public safety. The contract does not specify a specific number of deputies for any specific population. We just leave that between the sheriff and the individual cities to negotiate because it'll vary from city to city, and different cities have different priorities, what's important to them. Staffing for station support and overhead services is determined by the sheriff based on the direct staff requested by the city and the unincorporated staff provided by the county and other factors such as crime rates and calls for service. So that would be your lieutenants, your sergeants, and all your people are your professional staff, your secretaries, and people that also work in the building. Cities can share direct staff, and I believe the city of Encinitas still shares a community service officer with the city of Solana Beach, primarily to handle red light camera situations. The city pays for direct staff and equipment, which includes deputies, detectives, sergeants, community service officers, vehicles, and radios. And those are what we call direct costs, meaning you pay 100% of those costs. The station and support costs, as well as overhead costs and liability, are mandatory, and they are allocated based on the direct staffing requested by the city. So because in most of our stations, with a couple of exceptions, we have both city and county units. In your particular station, North Coastal, you have 3 contract cities plus the unincorporated area. So everything gets split proportionally 4 ways, depending on how many deputies or how many community service officers you have. We allocate costs over that. The city needs to advise the sheriff by May 1st of any changes for the future year. That gives us enough time to make correct adjustments. The city will receive monthly reports that provide information with respect to staffing, crime statistics, traffic statistics programs, patrol activities, and information-led policing. One of the questions I had was how can the public access that information? If the city chooses to make it public, that's up to the city. Otherwise, this information is available like any other information as allowed by law with a Public Records Act request. Some information is not necessarily allowable, but as long as it is allowable, you can get any of it with a Public Records Act request. And there are some services that we provide that we call regional services. We provide these to the cities without charge. Now, these services are also provided in non-contract cities, so they're basically provided to everybody in the county. Astria, which is our helicopter unit, the crime lab, which I mentioned, bomb arson, special enforcement detail, and then we have a whole bunch of task forces that we participate in, narcotic, gang, auto, theft, fugitive task forces, and then we have a search and rescue unit that is made up mostly of volunteers, and that's if somebody goes missing or somebody needs to be rescued, they work with our aerial units to do that. The cities within the county enter into an agreement, and then we have a thing called CLETAC, which the deputy clerk mentioned, and this is a chance for the city managers and any city staff that wants to come to meet with the sheriff, undersheriff, and the various commanders and my staff that manage the contract, and we do that at least twice a year. We have presentations from various parts of the department to explain to them what's going on, maybe some things that we're up to, maybe some hot button issues, what's going on. COVID, of course, has been a big one for a while. So how we're dealing with those issues. And that is my presentation. Does anybody have any questions?
Well, thank you very much for that information. Is there more to the presentation from the other two who are sitting next to you?
That's the presentation we have right now.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, thank you for that. I think we should go to questions from the council and from the equity committee liaisons who are here, and then we'll hear from the public comment, and then we can come back for any additional questions or comments. So one of my questions is about policies, like de-escalation training policies or those kinds of things. Is that negotiated in that negotiation process, or is that something that the directly elected sheriff sets, or how do policies fit in?
You want to take that, or you want me?
Can you hear me? Good evening. So those aren't set into the contract per se, but policies like de-escalation, those are things that are integral within the sheriff's department that are definitely within our policy. We train on those. There's statute, and so we abide by the statute that's in place as well as our own policies. De-escalation is specifically one of those.
But so I guess in a more structural way, I'm trying to understand if the policies are set by the sheriff. I know it's already a culture of training, or if there's a desire for policies to change, can cities request that, or what is the process of policy setting?
I think the best recourse is issues or concerns you have to bring forward to your captain, Dustin Lopez, and bring those forward, and then he can discuss them with the Law Enforcement Services Command. It's something that could come up in the negotiations going down the road or in CLETAC, but it's not something that we wrap into the negotiations specifically, the itemized, I guess, desires if you want certain policies. The only itemization that would be in the contract would be basically what you want to hire in terms of deputies, detectives, traffic, et cetera.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And then I saw the slide where you said there are no separate side letters or attachments. Does the Del Mar Fairgrounds not have its own separate side letter about enforcement at the fairgrounds?
Yes, we have a separate contract with the 22nd District Agriculture Association for services provided at the fairgrounds. They're a legal entity, and so we can contract directly with them, which we do.
Okay, so that's basically a separate thing that's outside of the city negotiation. So that's not negotiated by Del Mar or Solana Beach?
No, that's a separate negotiation with it, and similar to how we negotiate with North County Transit District to provide the railroad enforcement, our transit enforcement unit, Grossmont College, where we're currently providing law enforcement services, the high schools where we provide school resource officers. So yeah, there's separate agreements outside of our city agreement.
Okay, okay, thank you. Okay, do any of my colleagues have questions at this point?
I have one question.
Okay, Deputy Mayor?
Madam Mayor, I just have one initial question, and this question's for Captain Lopez or any of the support that you have there. We've had a number of burglaries in Alevenheim and other kind of petty larcenies around the Encinitas Ranch Town Center, especially around the holidays. And people question the level of service that we have here in Encinitas. And so I know that that it was just said that staffing is really kind of particular to each city, but I wonder if you can kind of let us know what you feel about the staffing here in Encinitas. There must be some sort of kind of pattern or algorithm in terms of what you would desire for proper level of law enforcement in a city, and just coverage. And so just wanted to kind of know from your perspective, the level of coverage that we have in Encinitas. Should we be negotiating and bargaining for more? Do we have too much? What's your perspective on that?
Good evening, by the way. My perspective, I think the staffing levels are adequate currently at their level. Just like you said, crime is algorithm. Sometimes there's a spike in residential burglaries, there'll be a decrease. But overall, I think right now, with the staffing levels we have and the coverages that we have per capita, I look at national levels too, as far as what the per capita level is. And per capita level is, basically every 10,000 people, how many officers you want. Nationally, it's somewhere around 1.8 to 2.2. Here, we're basically 0.9 to like 1.2, which is a little lower, but we don't have the crime rates of some other cities. So if you're asking me if we're adequate, I think we're very adequate at this point in time. From what I've seen, I've obviously only been here since September, but I think what we have in place is very adequate.
One other point. So I noticed in the presentation it says that we actually pay for a number of things individually, and one of them is our vehicles. And it may be that since we have several cities out of the North Coast kind of sheriff's depot, that's allocated amongst the cities that are coming out of there. And I see your head nodding. But I guess the point that I've brought up before, and a small point, but I'd like to bring it up again. If we're paying for the vehicle, I would love to put City of Encinitas on that vehicle. So Sheriff's Department, City of Encinitas. And you see that in other, like Los Angeles County has with several cities where they actually have the city name on there. And I know that the cars go into other communities, but I think that it would give just kind of a higher sense of security and a feeling like that it's our local law enforcement. You are our local chief of police, but I think that it gives a little bit even more ownership. And what I'll discuss later after we have a little chance to kind of talk more is about community policing. And I think it really kind of drives home that point about community policing too. So if you have any comments on that, I would love to
There
see
are
something
cities
like
that
that
do
happen.
it. I believe Vista does it, and I can check with our fleet manager. At one point, they kind of asked that we make magnetic decals so that when cars go into service or get shifted to another city, it's easy to change it, or if your car gets used someplace else. But I do know that other cities have done it, and if you're interested, just talk to Dustin about it, and we can talk to our fleet manager about how to accomplish that.
Thank you. Councilmember Hensy.
Thank you. Yeah, I want to thank County Sheriff for your presence here today and having all the parts that will be able to answer our questions present here at this meeting. It is important to us as our biggest expenditure in the city of Encinitas. And so you showing up and being available to answer these questions is much appreciated. I had two questions just to start off. One's related to data. So I'm just curious to know what other cities have chosen to make that data public and share it with their constituents. I know that we, the public, receive sort of a weekly update, and it usually includes one or two anecdotal experiences from that week past. But to be able to see the data for the city of Encinitas as a whole, what are some of the pluses and minuses of that? And then who analyzes that data? Is it somebody here within our North Coastal Station? Is it somebody at headquarters? I know Sandag puts together a report too. So I'm curious to know how we can increase that kind of transparency to better inform our decision making. And then the second question that I have that relates to that is 2 years ago now, Sheriff Gore invited electeds from all the contract cities to participate in an in-person forum. And it was really helpful and enlightening to a lot of us, I think, to understand what you needed from us as decision makers in our cities to better support reduction of crime and the things that you were working so hard for. And out of that, we learned that safe parking programs were a way that we could assist in crime prevention. We learned that having HOPE programs, the HOT teams that are working with the social worker, that could be helpful. So will there be that opportunity on a regular basis to have that kind of interaction and receive that information? And even at the more micro level here at our city, we want to balance our resources in a way that serves you and serves our residents. So, how can we do that better?
It was my intent to make that an annual event, but unfortunately COVID got in the way. And I already had one in the planning for last December, and then the new variant showed up. We feel that those meetings are best accomplished in person as opposed to trying to do a Zoom meeting with 100 people. So we thought we would do it. So we're hoping maybe this summer, if the variant gets down to where we feel we could get a group of people together again. And that's the only holdup, is that we'd planned to make it was a December event. We planned to make it an annual event every first of every December. But in 21 and 20, 20 and 21, COVID got in the way. So yes, we are intending to make that at least an annual event.
That's great. I'm happy to hear it. I think in these unusual times, it would be valuable even to do it in a virtual format before that deadline of May 5th, where you would need input from the cities to be able to tailor the input. So that would be my recommendation, if at all possible.
Okay, we'll see what we can do.
I can answer the first part of your question too. As far as the stats go, I provide a monthly report to the city manager. Within that report, it details, crimes that happen to the city, and it's broken down by crimes of violence, property crimes. It rates what basically the statistical crime stats are, within the city as far as crimes. It has response times, and then it has the entire, calls for service, how many calls were on each beat, and basically it compares them year to date. So that's provided. I also will add, and I wanted to put this out to the public since we're in this meeting, if you ever go to sdsheriff.gov, it is huge for resources related to the Sheriff's Department and public safety. It has a lot of open source information there. There's actually an icon called open source, where basically all statistical data can be drawn from to include comparables to other cities.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Councilmember Hinsey.
Oh, that was mostly my question. And did you say that's done by your team here in the North Coastal Station?
Yes, we have 2 analysts that work at the North Coastal Station, a senior analyst and a normal analyst, and they compile all the information, and then it's provided to me. I discuss that obviously with my lieutenants, as far as, crime mapping and intelligent-led policing and the stuff that we use the analytical data for, and then it's compiled, and basically the report's given to the city manager.
So essentially, all that data is available on the website at SD Sheriff, but if the cities want to see it individually or provide that own information on their websites, then they would break it out and have somebody doing that here.
Correct, if that's the way I want to do it, correct.
Got it. Thank you.
Essentially, the goal for the Sheriff's Department is to have everything on a public-facing website, so you don't have to have CPRAs, you don't have to make the request. We want to put as much as we can out, so you can just click, get the information, and if we eventually can just slice it down to Encinitas or whatever city, those are things we can do when we tweak the information and the intelligence for you. So those are things we are doing, and things we can continue to do based on what you would like to see, too, and what we can put out based on law, because there are some things we can't put out, unfortunately, but most of what we do, we want to share with you. So that's 100% where we've been going in the last probably 2 years.
Thank you. Councilmember Kranz.
Yes, I would point out that over my 10 or so years of service, we have, as a council, we received public safety briefings where the Sheriff's Department would send a representative, and the fire service would have someone there, as well as marine safety. And I've always found those briefings to be very helpful, keep me informed about trends and issues that might be of importance from a policy point of view. So I would love to see those come back. At times they were quarterly, sometimes they became semi-annual, but getting the briefings is very helpful, so I would appreciate that. I also would ask that the briefing with the sheriff, I appreciate the fact that it's always better in person, but as someone who has a day job, if it were available hybrid, that would be really great, so that I could participate even if I couldn't get off work. So, and then finally, your presentation was great. Talked about the first contract with the city of Encinitas, which was in 1987. And most people know that we incorporated in 86. But the important thing is that there's a long history with the Sheriff's Department here in Encinitas, so, and it goes back much further than incorporation. So I think that the relationship with the community has always been very important. I would love to see the cars come back as Duffy green, but I don't think they're going to do that. That was a cute color. How old is the sheriff's substation out on El Camino Real, Villa Molina?
I don't know what the construction date is.
Yeah, it was built in the 70s, and I know there's a detention facility there. Do you ever use that?
Well, there is what we consider cells or detention areas there, but we only use them for temporary housing. Obviously, if an arrest is made, it's just they're detained in those cells as long as it takes for the deputy to process the paperwork and book them into jail. So there's no long-term detention going on there.
Right, and there was a substation here in downtown on D Street, which is now the Herb and Sea restaurant, but there had been talk in the recent past about the possibility of trying to find space downtown. Is that something that the department might still be interested in doing, or is it working fine to have everything located out on El Camino Real?
I'd love to have those discussions only because as traffic gets, worse and worse, anytime we can, spread out where the deputies are at and where they're working from, we have basically a better response time to the area. So anytime we can, have substations in different areas, it improves the response times.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to say that the training that you offered that was in person several years ago, one of the key takeaways for me from that I still remember that was most impactful had to do with your homeless outreach teams. And it showed pictures, and then people spoke to us about the experience. And the bottom line was the Sheriff's Department was saying, cities and the county have not, and social services providers have not provided enough options for people. So we don't have low barrier places to take people when we are in the Caltrans right of way or in riverbeds or things. And so a message to us was like, do more, try to help more, try to provide us more opportunities. And I do feel like that was really valuable. And so, having a big training that goes into a lot of detail about the way our largest budget item is spent in our city and how you're operated and the expertise that happens at that massive center that you have is really valuable to fill out that picture, especially because you have newly elected people who come on to these cities every year and, of course, just don't have an expertise in that. So I just wanted to also second what my colleagues were saying about the value of that. And then also, I just wanted to put this meeting in context a little bit, and also the question of the number of deputies. So when then Captain Haidar was our captain, she was our captain in this city, we had a big meeting about the number of deputies and whether it was adequate and what were the crime statistics, and talked a lot about that at that time. And this proposal that we have in front of us for the next 5 years does not involve cutting sheriff deputies, and we have actually not cut sheriff deputies in this city. And we have expanded certain things, like, for example, the downtown at night having to do with bars and code enforcement and just making sure that we keep as much order as possible down there. That's an area that we have done more patrolling than we used to. And so we've been receiving some emails that seem to indicate some perception in the public that maybe we're thinking about cutting the sheriff or moving away from the sheriff or defunding the police or, and none of that is actually what's happening right now. So I just want to put in context that this sheriff's contract would have come to us on consent and actually did. And several of us pulled it and said, hey, we've been talking about this a lot at our equity committee. There's obviously a lot of interest in law enforcement given the times that we're in. And also it is our single largest budget item. So let's have a special meeting, which is what this is, to make sure that everybody's questions can be answered. We can talk in public about how policies and priorities are set and what are the opportunities for changing that in the future or now, and just allow a fuller analysis and airing of this large budget item. So the proposal, you didn't go into it, you didn't put it up on the screen, but is a certain number of deputies and a certain number of cars and a whole thing that basically is the proposal that's been negotiated through that committee that you showed. And I just, in case you had that, you could put it up. But if you don't, I just wanted to just have you confirm that there is not a plan to be cutting the services at this point. And so, moving into a contract, we would have as much of the law enforcement services from the sheriff as we have historically had.
Yeah, we're still working on the actual document. We had to wait for board approval yesterday. But no, there's no plan to change anything for Encinitas. Your staffing level is exactly the same this year as it was going into 22-23 as it was in 21-22.
Okay, thank you. So before we go to the public comment, I think we have 12 public comment. I want to make sure that our equity committee members are able to ask questions too. So if either of you or neither of you have to, but if you'd like to come to the microphone and ask any questions, you're welcome to do that. Marlon's a school board member, so he's used to being on the other side of the public comment. I think there's a button, is there? Oh, maybe it's working, so just
Hello?
there.
Oh, okay, there we go. There we go. It's been a hot mess of a day. My printer's not working, so I had to bring my laptop, and oh, goodness gracious. First off, I want to say thank you all for joining us. My glasses are all steamed up. It's absolutely insanity today. So I have a very brief statement that I'd like to read. Thank you, Mr. Sparks, for covering a lot of that ground. You answered a lot of questions and added a lot of clarity. Again, good afternoon, Mayor, City Council, Captain Lopez, City Manager, those of us in attendance. As a member of the Encinitas Equity Committee, we've been tasked to frame how we work with our communities and public safety personnel. We have also been tasked to guide efforts to compile and interpret data. As the city works towards a new contract agreement with the San Diego Sheriff's Department, it is imperative that the city takes a more forward-leaning, assertive approach to contract negotiations. As you go into these negotiations, I ask you to stay focused on the ultimate goals: fiscal responsibility and safety. Thankfully, the numbers or the comments by Mr. Sparks really makes me feel confident that we are definitely going in that right direction. I want this to be clear. When I talk about fiscal responsibility, I am not advocating for cuts. I am advocating, however, for the use of data to make informed decisions that will lead to wise fiscal decisions in the future. If we are effectively using all the public health and safety resources that are available to us, we can provide residents the support they need, make our community safer, while also making better use of the city's funds. How do we do this? Using data, the city can stay informed on trends, problem areas, and quickly address them in a proactive manner instead of a reactive manner, which frequently ends up being an overreaction. Data tools such as ARGIS, NIBRS, and RIPA are already being utilized by the Sheriff's Department. I recommend the city require the Sheriff's Department to provide monthly readouts from these sources and any other proprietary sources or tools the Sheriff's Department uses to evaluate performance and base staffing decisions. Some of these metrics should include, but not be limited to, patrol and traffic services, staffing levels for all shifts, response times for all calls, types of calls by priority, disposition of calls, RIPA data. I'll spare you all the gory details of RIPA. Detective caseloads, case closure rates, issuance rates to the DA, and I think especially the detective case closure rates. According to Attachment B of the current contract, there are 6 detectives assigned to Encinitas at a cost of $184.6 thousand a year, or per position, annually $1.1 million total. I think it's really important for the city's leadership to know exactly how much these detectives are being utilized, and, again, years out, as we approach the next contract, the city can have the tools to make informed decisions. Currently, Section K, the recording requirements of the current contract states that the city will receive monthly reports. Captain Lopez has stated that a report is going to the city manager monthly. One of the big questions I have is who else on the city staff receives these reports, and specifically, does the city council receive these reports? And what decisions are being made with the information contained within those reports? Additionally, I'd recommend the city take a proactive position in promoting services provided by the county, such as MCRT, the Mobile Crisis Response Team, along with providing tips and tools to educate the public on when, how, and who to call for services on the city's websites or any direct mail publications that come out. With better public education and increased awareness of services provided, we can help reduce sheriff's deputies' response times while also making our city safer by effectively using the resources that are currently available to us. One example is if a property crime has already happened and the suspect is no longer on site, is it wise to even call 911? I feel like that would be a waste of resources when you can call a non-emergency number and have somebody come out that way. Eventually, having a better understanding of what is happening regarding public safety within our community will result in wiser decisions regarding future contracts. Because with this being the largest expenditure on the city, at some point, you can't continue to make 3% increases because it reaches a point where you have to then make decisions that you may not be prepared to make. And some of those things that we hold dear within this community will eventually begin to suffer. So therefore, being a little bit smarter about how we utilize our resources and services we are paying for is critical. And that is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Marlon. Robin, would you like to speak?
Hi. Good morning. I'm Robin Sales. I'm on the Equity Committee. I'm also on the Behavioral Health Advisory Board for the County of San Diego from District 3. I'm a retired clinical social worker, so my specialty is mental health and spent much time in my career working in crisis intervention. So I'm here to talk about the MCRT, give an update, and have some asks for both the Sheriff's Department and the City Council. So I was asked by the team, by our Equity Committee, to give you a report. The North Coastal MCRT, Mobile Crisis Response Team, which covers the same territory as the North Coastal Sheriff's Station, has been in existence since January of 2021, so it's 1 year ago. Originally, it was a pilot program, and because of its relative success in diverting mental health, substance abuse cases away from an armed police response, is now functioning at a greater level, covering 24/7, 7 days a week response, and also recently added covering children and youth, which is a big deal, in my opinion. As the 911 dispatch integration is not yet complete and the 988 national call number for mental health crises not yet implemented, the MCRT requires people in distress to call the Access and Crisis Line. As a member of the Behavioral Health Advisory Board, I have been closely watching how the County Behavioral Health Services implements this program with full integrity. I have educated the Equity Committee as to the progress of the program here in Encinitas. After meeting with the manager of the Exodus Incorporated MCRT on January 19th, I can report to you that the program is moving towards success, but is not yet there. There have only been 8 calls for service from Encinitas since the program's inception. How can the city contribute to higher utilization rates of that service, and why is that important? It is well documented that the intervention of an armed police officer often exacerbates an already fragile situation when responding to a mental health crisis. De-escalation by trained mental health professionals, community health workers, and peer support specialists can mean the difference between life and death. While the PERT clinicians are highly trained, they do arrive with an officer, and from my personal experience as a crisis clinician, that team can escalate situations. In Encinitas, homeless individuals often suffer from mental health crisis, and the goal is to work closely with cities to coordinate services for those people. The county has yet to implement their public information campaign, which would help consumers be educated about the services that are offered. Only 2 available billboards were identified in all of North County. That's hard to believe for me. The county is going to begin a social media campaign in February, but targeted local communication will be very important. Here is how the city could promote the success of the program. One is to put pressure on our county representatives, Supervisor Lawson-Remer, Chair Fletcher, and the Sheriff's Department to make sure that our residents receive appropriate mental health crisis services, diverting them away from law enforcement intervention and into timely mental health substance abuse services. Fully funding community-based programs is vital, and that's something as a city council you can do, use your influence. Use banners, billboards, and include the access and crisis line number on all city communication to the community. Flyers should be placed strategically, and the city council could post info on Nextdoor and other social media sites. And disseminate info to all medical and mental health and substance abuse providers within the city. Direct our housing manager and other outreach programs to continue to work closely with the Exodus program to fine-tune the program to fit our needs here in Encinitas. Requests from Captain Lopez and the Sheriff's Department the following data and information. If a unit is called out for a mental health substance abuse crisis and they realize that the situation does not need a law enforcement response, how often have the deputies contacted the access and crisis line and requested that a team be dispatched? One more page. Oops, sorry. How do the sheriffs train both local deputies, community service officers, and other staff at the station to decide how to triage? How many calls for service are there from Encinitas for these mental health and substance abuse crises per month? How many were for mental health, substance abuse, homelessness, or other conditions appropriate for the MCRT? Who in the city analyzes that data? If calls were diverted away from law enforcement, would the city be willing to change its contract by the addendum process to reflect the saving of time and staff hours that the diversion of calls would afford? Ultimately, the success of this diversion program depends on how we communicate to our residents and how law enforcement responds. It is the city's responsibility to have an informed citizenry and to closely monitor how the sheriffs operate. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Do you want to respond to any of the questions about how the sheriff dispatches the MCRT and how you triaged decision-making and that?
Sure. So currently, the MCRT is only being dispatched through access and crisis line, and we are waiting for our MOU to be approved across the county for all the different law enforcement agencies, and we're hoping that goes through now and into February, and we're hoping we'll get all the signatures we need. What that means for the signatures is that then our dispatch centers can start dispatching directly to MCRT. So a person who calls the dispatch center saying I'm in crisis, whatever they may be going through, the dispatchers are being trained now in terms of what is happening with them. They're looking at the MCRT criteria that we have developed in partnership with Behavioral Health, HHSA, County Council, all the different legal units of all the different agencies, and law enforcement. And so they've been looked at not only from a law enforcement perspective, but a behavioral health perspective. And so we've developed, I think, a very good criteria, very much in line with most other MCRTs you're going to see nationwide. And so those dispatchers now will take that information based on their training experience from just regularly dispatching calls as well as what MCRT criteria is. They will start dispatching directly to MCRT. So that's what we've been waiting for. We're very excited about it. It's been a tremendous partnership. I've been very lucky to be in it from the very beginning, working with behavioral health, Dr. Bergman, Dr. Garcia, and now Exodus and Telecare. So that's kind of what we're waiting for in the next couple months. It's kind of a wait and see how it's going to go. Since Access and Crisis Line has been taking calls, and now and again deputies are getting calls, or they're seeing something out on their own accord and are making their own calls to MCRT. So that's actively happening right now, which is fantastic. So currently, year to date, Encinitas has actually had 12 MCRT responses now, so it's gone up, which is a good thing. So the information and the word is getting out there in comparison to Solana Beach, who had 2, and Del Mar, who had 3. So we will continue. The social media campaign is launching in February with Age to Say. They just shared the media with us. It's fantastic. It looks great. They are working on more billboards. They're working on benches. They're actually looking at targeted communities who are probably more prone to needing some mental health assistance. And so they're using a data-driven approach for that very method to get that information out there. Additionally, they're creating cards for our deputies and officers in other areas to hand out at scenes. We will have training at all of the sheriff stations and other locations throughout the county, other agencies, by mental health and behavioral health providers to deputies. On these are the things to look for, these are things we can help with. Also, likewise, we're also training them on these are things you need to cue in on when somebody might be triggered by something you don't realize, and that it's escalating, and then you need to call law enforcement. So it's a give and take for both of them, and I think it's been a wonderful partnership. I think it's 100% moving in that right direction, but it's brand new. And unfortunately, they're not 24/7 yet. So their triage line is 24/7, but they're not sending people out past 10 o'clock at night. The hope is to get 24/7, and so that's what we're waiting for. And I'm probably preaching to the choir, but finding mental health resources and practitioners and experts like yourself is very hard these days. It's a tough career, and promoting those positions and recruiting has been tough, and I think that's what they're working on. So I think this next year is going to just see how that program goes. We're going to be working in partnership, and I'm hoping we can come back in a year and report phenomenal stats and success stories. And I think sharing some of those stats in terms of how many calls went to MCRT as opposed to a PERT deputy, as opposed to a sheriff's deputy, those are easy to flesh out and definitely something we need to continue to look at, as well as look at calls where we send a PERT and see how it goes and say, hey, that might have been an MCRT call. Next time, and you train your dispatchers and say, okay, every call is very different though, so we have to continue to look at them, and we can't kind of put them in a perfect box. Deputies have to know how to respond, as well as clinicians, as well as dispatchers. So that's kind of where we're at. I think I'm very optimistic about the program, but it's definitely a partnership with behavioral health and the sheriff's deputy and the community. And I completely agree with you in terms of how does the community help push out those resources. I think the city can find places where that these are areas that we might want to put some literature, we might want to do some training, we might want to bring it into our schools necessarily if they want to just put that out there. I think those are all great ideas that you're bringing up. I'm like, hey, can you come work with us? Maybe that would help. and as Marlon too, I was like, oh my gosh, he's saying everything I'm going to say. So I appreciate the time and all the input that you gave us, because it's stuff that means a lot to us to take it back and work with it. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And that's great to hear. I mean, I'm thrilled about the fact that soon people will be able to see somebody having a mental break, and they don't have to go search for some number. They can call 911, but it'll be immediately routed over to mental health instead of to armed deputy, if it's if it qualifies.
Right.
That's just fantastic, because
Yes.
that's the integrated system we really need.
And eventually we'll be the 988, and that'll be a whole nother thing, a little obstacle we're going to have to kind of get over, but we're kind of working on that now too.
Okay, I see. Okay. Councilmember Kranz.
Yes, thank you for that explanation. And it does remind me a little bit about the conversations that we've had here as a council over the many years when it comes to the first responders that roll when a call comes in that requires medical attention. Our firefighters are the first to respond. And so there has been a lot of talk about, well, if it's a medical call, why do you send the fire engine and, firefighters instead of, paramedics that are driving an ambulance that can take them directly to the hospital, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's really very important, the evolution that we're seeing in the first response in emergencies, not only on the fire side and health and medical side, but also on the law enforcement and mental health side as well. So very pleased to see that. But this conversation came up really came to a head with the disaster in Minneapolis with George Floyd. And I was impressed by how quickly the sheriff modified restraint procedures and took action to address some of the concerns that the community had at that time. And so I appreciate that, and I think that some of this conversation is the result of what was started then, and I'm very happy to see that. But during those conversations, I came to realize that some of the changes that members of the community were advocating for aren't changes that we as a council can direct be made, right? Isn't it true that the contract is, as was explained, everybody gets the same contract? There's an addendum that says what kind of personnel, but in terms of operations, the elected sheriff is the one who works with his staff and establishes procedures and policies and training. And so that the role of this body here is more of a fiscal role, and our responsibility is related to having the right level of service, so we're neither wasting money nor endangering the community. Do you agree that I've framed that correctly?
Yes, council member. That's actually a very good definition. The contract is primarily a fiscal document, and that's actually intentional. Because if we start to having to write operational issues in there, first of all, the sheriff, as you pointed out, is an elected official, and he is free to run his department the way he wants. And also, it may not be the same for every city. And then we have contracts that got all sorts of weird stuff in it. And every time you want to change a policy, you don't have to do a contract amendment. So intentionally, we leave the operational decisions to the sheriff and to his command staff, and the contract basically sets the financial parameters and the staffing levels that the city agrees to. And then the operations are handled by the command staff and passed down to the deputies through the chain of command.
Well, I appreciate that, and it does kind of make it a bit of a challenge in this role as somebody whose primary responsibility is public safety in our community. So, I think that what I have tried to do is encourage people that wanted to see change in policies and procedures to address those to the County Board of Supervisors, who has fiscal control over the operations of the Sheriff's Department, but ultimately to the sheriff. And we're certainly prepared to advocate if we see issues that arise that are important to change. That's why the meetings that the sheriff was having with Contract City elected representatives was very important. But ultimately, unlike Carlsbad, which has its own police department, and theoretically then the elected body can more directly influence the way public safety from the police department is performed, we're a little more limited in how we can actually control the operations side. So it's an interesting challenge, and I appreciate the partnership that we've had over the years with the sheriff and his captains and deputies. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, let's go to the public speakers now.
Yes, Mayor, we have approximately 12. First three speakers are Stephen Lord, then Tom Packard, and then Carol Searling.
Well, surprisingly, I'm first. I'm a long-term resident. I came out here in '82. I went through moving into a city. I've seen the Sheriff's Department operate over the years. I've been very pleased with the Sheriff's Department. I don't think I had any bad things happen. So I'm really here to say, let's have more sheriff's department. I mean, what I'm looking at is an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. To the north of us in LA, we got a hot mess of crime and all kinds of stuff going on. Just down south in San Diego, we got the same thing. Now, if this was an epidemic, a true epidemic, we'd be looking at these things spreading down this way. It's an epidemic of crime. I think we're going to be looking at Encinitas getting hit with a crime wave over the next year or so. Everyone else has been hit with a crime wave. There is such a thing as crime tourism. You know, people can go down south and, just nip down the 5 and say, oh, look, Encinitas. Well, they don't even lock their doors in Encinitas. Let's go rob them. So I would encourage the city council to think seriously about increasing the budget, not under any circumstances. I think Kathleen already said they're not going to cut it, but really need to increase it. Joe mentioned the robberies we've seen in the Leeuwenhoek. If, I will go on the Leeuwenhoek Northwest neighborhood watch, I see there's always something up there. Somebody's been broken in for something or other, or something's been stolen off the porch. May think, these are property crimes, they're not a big deal. It's a big deal if someone's broken into your house. It's an emotional problem to deal with because, maybe next time they break in, I'll be there. Or my wife will be there, or my kids will be there. And then we've had situations in Encinitas where people have been the house has been broken into and people have been tied up and tortured. So it's not out of the question. And so this is really what I think we ought to be talking about. More money for these guys. Now, I think the Equity Committee, I went to one of their meetings. I was very impressed with the thoughtfulness of what they were saying. But I think that's an add-on. We need more law and order. We need to, the best thing you can do to stop crime is a certainty of punishment. If you're going to arrest a guy and they're going to get put away, they're not going to come here and rob us. They're going to go somewhere else and rob them, which is fine by me. I don't mind, it's not my house that gets robbed. Someone else can get robbed. So let's encourage them to stay out of Encinitas. So it's up our support for the Sheriff's Department. Let's get more sheriffs here. And add some mental health support. We've surely got a huge homeless mental health problem. Yeah, I'm all for that. And more metrics are a good idea also, but we've got to be careful what we measure because metrics drive behavior. If you only measure one thing, people will focus on that one thing and not do anything else. And then, you will get into a situation of quotas and all kinds of other stuff. So I think metrics are a good thing, but we've got to be careful with them. Okay, well, thank you very much. More money for the sheriffs. Thank you.
I think I'm next. Tom Packard, Mayor and council members and staff, both sheriff staff and city staff. Thanks for your attention to this. I've made a lot of scribbling in my comments because you've already talked about some of the things that I think that are really important. So maybe I can just underline and make a couple of other comments. I appreciate the clarity that the contract is basically fiscal, and I think that Councilmember Kranz and other people are talking about some of these are policies that really get set through the county code. But I think the operational things that you're talking about, I'm hoping some of that can get addressed through some more detailed dialogue, and ideally sooner. The mayor mentioned maybe having this big event. I don't know when in May, but I think have things like that soon enough that they can impact the discussions that you actually have with the sheriff in terms of seeing if you can be more specific on expectations, everything from, traffic accidents going down at a certain corner to racial bias. I appreciated the information about the different contracts, like the 22nd Ag District. If they have a special contract, maybe you could have something that would at least look at what the performance levels are now and what you'd like to see for the next year. And if it can't get into the contract, just be explicit about that. And Captain Lopez mentioned a ratio, which I think was appreciated. It's good to know that. And in the contract, I think if you can ask the sheriff to provide the best practices, data and performance standards on things like detectives for a city the size of Encinitas. You know, what analysis do they have that we need 6 detectives here? And Marlon Taylor talks some about performance measures. I think the sheriff gathers data like that, and I'm glad that I guess we can eventually get access to the routine things, types of stops and whatnot. But to have all of those data easily available for the community, but also just for you all, so that you can look at what you want in terms of actual performance improvements in not only crime reduction, but some of these equity issues, and ideally do that kind of analysis so that you might be able to make some adjustments. And if there's a rationale for 6 detectives, okay, but if you could say, well, maybe there's not a professional standard for that many detectives, maybe you can reallocate money to homeless services or something like that. So I think no matter what, just kind of be thoughtful about what you're doing and have it be data-based and really focus on your expectations, what you want in terms of public safety, and try to quantify those things. Thanks for your attention.
Hi, good evening. I'm Carol Serling. Thank you for being here, everyone, and bringing clarity to this issue. I just want to share something on a personal level. In my neighborhood, I live in Cardiff, and I live in a neighborhood with a number of cul-de-sacs. And on the 16th evening, Sunday the 16th, we had a home robbery. This occurred when the homeowner was not there. It was about 8 o'clock at night. This is something you've probably read about, where these vans pull up and they have 3 people who go in with hoodies and masks, and there's one driver. They parked on a street in between lights, so there could not be any identification of the vehicle. They entered through an unlocked downstairs door. They first stole some things from their porch, some delivered items, and they also were able to get in the house. This homeowner had 2 dogs in a closed upstairs bedroom. There were no lights on, nothing. So admittedly, this is a lesson for all of us in terms of what we do lately when we're leaving our homes, because as everyone's noticed, crime is up nationally and locally. And we've never really had this before, but it was quite frightening. The whole incident was captured by a resident who lived directly across the street, had a ring system. The police were called. She was the person who lived in the house with the ring system, was in Palm Springs, called another neighbor who then called the police. And it took 5 minutes for anyone to answer the phone, and then it took another 5 to 6 minutes for it to be transferred to the sheriff's department in Encinitas. 45 minutes later, someone showed up, and it was a sheriff from Santee. So my point in telling this story, fortunately no one was hurt, and it was all reported, and someone did come, but by then the homeowner was there, and all these people were long gone. So they did steal things, and that's in process of being reported. My point is, I think we need better response time. And certainly having to wait 45 minutes for someone to come from Santee instead of from right here in Encinitas is problematic. So my position is that I'm very much in favor of renewing the contract as detailed this evening by the representatives of the Sheriff's Department. And I would, along with the first gentleman who spoke, desire that if there are any changes, we would add sheriffs and deputies, and so that we could increase the likelihood of better response time and increase the funding to provide for such increase in staffing as needed. I think that's it. That was good timing. Okay.
The next 3 speakers are Len Arkins, then E. Thompson, and the third one is Teresa Conkey.
Good evening, Council, Mayor Blakespear and District Representatives. I have brought charts and data to display the number of increasing crimes that have been committed within a 2-mile radius of Encinitas, your city. And these maps are taken from San Diego Sheriff.gov. Thank you very much. They're beautiful maps and very resourceful. It's very disturbing because how are you going to protect us citizens? This first map basically shows crimes from October and 2021 through November 2021 with 120 crimes. These crimes constitute burglary, car theft, break-ins, assault, DUI, drug arrest, vandalism, and that's just to name a few. The second map, 95 crimes committed from November to December 2021. The third map, 86 crimes committed from December to present. And mind you, our month is not up. South and east of us, in San Diego County, the map is riddled with crimes and it just peppers the map that it's almost impossible to read the amount of crimes that are happening south of us. It's obvious that these criminals are moving north and affecting our Encinitas and neighboring cities as well. Encinitas, we need to prepare ourselves. We need to be vigilant, alert, respectful to our sheriffs and police, and be patient if they cannot get to you in a fashionable time. So if you want to decrease the number of detectives or peace officers out on the street, you got to go to crimemapping.com and be proactive and protect yourselves and your property. This app also allows you to find sex offenders should they be located next door to you. Mayor Blakespear and council, you are leaving us citizens to fend for ourselves. It's not about hiring more sheriffs, Mr. Mosca, Deputy Mayor Mosca. This is what happens when you're soft on crime and ignoring the data and not acting on the data. You have to support and continue funding the San Diego County Sheriffs because law enforcement in general are fleeing our state. We know this. It's too expensive to live here is what I've heard, and they don't feel safe or supported serving our cities. So please support our San Diego County Sheriffs. Do not defund them in any way. If anything, you have to work on your soft crime and the policies that follow that soft crime. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight on this important issue. I would also like to ask you to please maintain or expand the sheriff contract, but most importantly, leave well enough alone and proceed with the renewal. Encinitas is a safer city than most in the county, despite a recent and highly concerning escalation of crime that I too have read about on social media next door and these crime reports shown. As residents, property owners, and business owners, we do want to feel safe and protected at all times and know that the sheriff team is only minutes away. The property taxes we pay go towards funding this critical public service benefit. And our sheriff team does do a fine job, and we're thankful for their service, performance, and the protection they offer. And I'm very happy as a property tax owner paying them easily 3% increase a year for what they provide, just like government officials get raises, trash truck drivers get raises. This is a normal way of life. So in other words, let's not meddle or change what's not broken. Let's focus on real problems in Encinitas and the real issues that do need prioritizing, and this is not one of them. If any changes were to be made at all, however, increasing the budget, as others have stated, and increasing the number of deputies as well as crisis managers and PERT team members on the street, to me makes perfect sense given our overall lax and soft on enforcement directive of certain laws and municipal code I've noticed in the city, as well as these increases in crime, theft, and robberies. Additionally, more deputies and PERT members would help with the increasing homeless population that's coming feeling welcome in our city, as well as increasing illegal camping and sleeping in our cars throughout our city. And these people do get out of their cars. I know that from living in Leucadia, and they rob houses. And then additional assistance could be for failed and dangerous city mobility designs resulting in bike collisions and traffic collisions, as well as a big concern is what the cannabis legalization might yield for our town, and we don't even know what that might bring, hence why we should have more duties and more people on the street. So that will only help further protect the residents, and I'd like to see us proceed wisely to renew and expand the number of deputies in the town. Sorry, I've said that now. As well as our code enforcement. We can do a much better job in our code enforcement, in my view. And I'd like to see us all salute the 5 fallen police officers year to date who have been killed protecting public safety. And be reminded that those American cities with their soft on crime policies and defunding of the police have very high crime rates. And Democrat-run cities, that is, and these are not policies that people in Encinitas want to see. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening, afternoon. I would like to address the issue of deputies not stopping vehicles or citing drivers for vehicles with expired tags. Current registration is critically important. This is a law enforceable on the books for a specific purpose, and it protects vehicle operators. Expired registration goes hand in hand with not having insurance coverage, thus impacting insurance rates for drivers maintaining policies. In other circumstances, expired registration is also due to vehicles not passing a smog test, thus having a negative environmental impact. This council stresses the importance of limiting environmental pollution, yet this action would prohibit ensuring a vehicle is environmentally compliant in our very community. We don't want Mylar balloons, but a deputy isn't allowed to ask if a smog test could be the reason. It is a privilege and not a right to operate a vehicle, and with this comes responsibility, a very basic responsibility. Disallowing stopping drivers lacking current registration penalizes and discriminates against drivers operating vehicles legally. Why does this shift responsibility from offender to the innocent? If this council disagrees with requiring current registration, perhaps lobby to have registration unnecessary at the state level. Furthermore, Encinitas has gone above and beyond to increase bike infrastructure everywhere we look, with protected bike lanes, hosting cyclovia-type events, and recently docking 65 electric bikes around the city where people can rent them and return them. Owning, operating e-bike in Encinitas should be the focus of privilege. Were the underprivileged who cannot have a credit card considered before launching that program? Or is that only for the privileged? Thank you.
The next 3 speakers are Natalie Satoon, then Jeff Stirk, and then Tamara Dixon. It's Natalie? Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon. Considering the recent massive crime wave in Southern California, this is exactly the wrong time to reduce law enforcement officers. The 2019 Encinitas Census indicated a population of 63,000. Our contract provides for 6 detectives, which is approximately 1 detective per 10,000 residents. In LA, the overall crime rate increased 95% in 2020. In the city of San Diego, the shooting rate has increased to 121% in 2021. In the last few weeks, there have been over 16 burglaries surrounding us. 6 women were recently drugged and sexually assaulted on the 101, and a female was raped in Cardiff by an intruder she did not know. Do these victims warrant crime investigation? Reducing or reallocating positions creates staffing challenges that have a snowball effect. This action provides for cases not being investigated promptly, but also creates officer burnout. Should we even address the issue of a wrongful conviction because not investigating a case thoroughly might be a leading factor in these tragic events? Is the city going to be responsible for the liability of all of the above? Within only a 2-mile radius in the last 25 days, there were 80 crimes logged, including 6 stolen vehicles, 20-plus vehicle break-ins. And thank you, I actually had a deputy come to my house at 4 o'clock this morning because of one in my house. So kudos to them for doing such a great job. 20-plus vehicle break-ins, 3 felony batteries with great bodily injury, 3 commercial burglaries, 1 commercial robbery with a weapon used, and many more. Let's not forget our beloved Hanson Surf Shop was the victim of 2 recent attempts at smash and grabs. We value our sheriff's department, and we cannot predict or project crime. Please do not consider making their jobs more difficult. We need them now more than ever. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'll make this pretty brief, but what I really want to do is I want to acknowledge and thank the sheriffs. I want to thank Captain Lopez and his deputies for their service in protecting our community. In today's world, with all the out-of-control gun violence in our country, they're risking their lives on a daily basis to protect us. And it's a thankless job, and I want to acknowledge their service and the protection they provide us and say thank you. Thank you to all of you. It's well appreciated. I guess the wake-up call for me in regards to the safety in our community was a gentleman who got robbed at Moonlight Beach last October. His gun pointed to his head. I'm sure you all saw it on the news. And for the first time in the 30-plus years that I've lived in this community, I didn't feel safe. Our most prized possession, Moonlight Beach, I didn't feel good having my kids or grandkids down there anytime near dusk or after dark. And it was a wake-up call. So I'm all for renewing the contract. I don't think we should make any changes to it, and if anything, I think we should beef up their Exhibit B, which lists the number of officers, et cetera. I think we need every one of those detectives. I guess I have a quote here from Jim Desmond. He recently said, "Public safety is the #1 priority for the government. And with violent crime on the rise, it is imperative that San Diego County have the necessary public safety officers." I'm sure you all agree, and it's a priority for you. And as has been said up here, I would encourage you to look at beefing up their Exhibit B, because our citizens need to feel safe. And in my opinion, that's your #1 job to our community, is to protect our citizens. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tamara Dixon, and I just want to ask, this is a huge word that everybody who's woke use, equity. I'm just wondering, can you guys explain what equity is that is concerning with this meeting? Can anybody tell me?
So public comment is not a back and forth time, so we don't answer questions from the public. We hear statements.
Okay.
And so we'll just let you have your 3 minutes, and you can say whatever you'd like about that. And then council members can speak after that if they'd like to.
Yeah, if I could make an appointment with you guys, I certainly would.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So when would that be?
So as I just stated, this is not a time for a back and forth. This is a time for you to make your 3-minute statement. So if you'd like to proceed with that, you may.
Okay, I have, 2 minutes and 30 seconds? I'm asking you a question when I can make an appointment with you.
Could you please keep her time running? And I'm going to let you speak, and at the end, if I'm going to answer your questions, I will, but I'm not going to get into a back and forth with you.
Okay, so after I use my 3 minutes or my 2 minutes and 15 seconds, you'll answer my question? Is that what you're saying? Since you're on the Equity Committee, can you tell me, what does equity have to do with helping a homeless person?
So we're not going to have a dialogue back and forth. You're both welcome to speak to each other outside of the public comment period, which is now at 1:40. But I invite you to speak to the council. That's what the public comment period is for.
My rights are being ignored by you guys. I want to know what equity has to do with this meeting. Equity is this big word that everybody wants to use, and it's just, it doesn't belong. It doesn't belong where the police department is. What have they done to say equity committee? These guys are great. So I'd like to know, what does equity have to do with the police department? And I'm looking at you. If you want to have a stare down, let's do it. Let's see, I have 33 seconds. Don't blink.
Thank you for your comments.
And the last four speakers are Julie Thunder, then Kathleen Lindeman, then Jedediah Stuber, and then the last speaker will be Peter Cole.
Wow, I don't know how to follow that one. I actually have a very similar question, but I'll circle back because I also, like the gentleman a couple before me, want to thank the Sheriff's Department deeply and sincerely. I've been here for over 35 years, and I've never had anything but admiration and thankfulness for them and their service. Although it is alarming what happened with that really long call. I hope someone can get to the bottom of that. And I would ask that if you do anything with a contract, is that you hire one additional deputy for each of the 3 rotations per day. I think we need it. I think what the other lady said, that crime is moving in, is absolutely correct. We all see the trends, no sense hiding from it. So I would like to have more deputies rather than less. And my concerns about the Equity Committee, although the 2 members here tonight, I thought made some very good statements and had some good ideas, it is confusing that we even have an Equity Committee that's involved in this. In fact, it's concerning that we have an Equity Committee at all. This committee was formulated by Mayor Blakespear and Councilmember Hinsey. You created it on your own. It doesn't fall in the normal commissions that have representation from each of the districts in the city. It's a committee that the 2 of you formed, and then you handpicked the members. Then, and you also promised that it wouldn't cost any money, and now it is costing money. And I listened to the last equity meeting, and the entire last half of it was discussing policing policies. I don't want people that I didn't elect discussing with our mayor and a council member policing policies in a formal way, and then coming to a city council meeting and being given more time than the public to what might have sounded like demands from our sheriff's department and from our city. So like the previous speaker, I find the fact that a hand-picked committee is part of this process. But if you take anything away from me, I hope you'll consider adding another deputy, and maybe you can make that decision on yourselves, by yourselves, without the equity committee. Thank you.
Okay to take it down here. Hi, Kathleen Lindeman, Leucadia. Like you, I had printer problems, so I didn't get a copy of this for all of you. I'm here today because I have an article I want to share with all of you. It was in the Rafu Shimpo, the Los Angeles Japanese American newspaper, on July 20th, 2020, written by Nick Nagatani, and was first shared by Nick's family with their friends. I'm one of the friends. And then I shared it with many others friends who are LA or California natives. And then I shared it with Encinitas friends last week with the Equity Committee, and I hope you all were able to get a copy of it, because I had printer problems then too. I think it's me that's the problem, not the printer. And I'd like to share it with you. It has to do with history, a history begun before our time, but a history whose influences have impacted our lives. All of us who have read this article have learned more of our own history and recognize the value of what Nick is saying. I'm only going to read the first paragraph, and then you can read the rest after the meeting. I am but one, this is from the article. I am but one of hundreds of JA baby boomers raised and educated in Sainan Crenshaw neighborhood. We owe our Crenshaw roots to restrictive racial covenants that prohibited renting to Isai and Nisai after being released from America's concentration camps. Crenshaw and Boyle Heights were two of the first post-war Southern California enclaves, affording rental housing to Japanese Americans. I've also asked for copies to be given to the Sheriff's Department. It's a very good article that we can all learn from. And the other two things I think about, Tony, you don't know Nick, but you do know his relatives. You know the Shitaras, and you know Tatsukimoto. Nick's married to their niece, Wendy. Our city is a diverse, multi-ethnic, multicultural city. It has been from first founding to when it was incorporated. Am I almost timed out?
You're totally timed out, but you can make a last sentence, but
Okay.
not a last page, please.
No. This is a multi-ethnic, I'm sorry, I just said that.
Kathleen, I'm sorry, your time is up.
Okay, that should be reflected in the staffing of the sheriffs in our city.
Okay, thank you so much. I know the time goes very fast.
Jedediah?
How you guys doing? I wasn't planning on speaking, so forgive me if this gets a little off topic. Safety is the first thing that you need to ensure as mayor. That was said by Dianne Feinstein in her first speech as a mayor. The difference between her and our mayor is that our mayor does not like us as a community. She is only here to use us as a stepping stone for her political aspirations. As we grow in this town, we are seeing an increase in crime. We need more police, not less. We need more funding, more training, and more support for our police officers. The only question in this meeting should be, what can we do to support our police? Our mayor claims that she does not want to defund our police, but she's not in favor of increased funding also, which is what is actually needed. She prioritizes urban development and chaos over open space and serenity. Mayor Blakespear said she has real solutions to lingering challenges like our homeless crisis. Well, Mayor, have you ever considered the reason that they are lingering is because politicians like you never do anything? You, Joseph, and ones like you two, all you do is talk. You talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk, but you never say anything or do anything. What we need is a real leader. We need a leader that believes in Encinitas first, not two politicians who want to use this as a stepping stone. Let's see. Our mayor is running for state senate on a platform, like I said, of providing real solutions to lingering issues like homelessness. But if you ask her to outline just one real solution, she blocks you on Instagram and Facebook and deletes all of your comments. The ACLU frowns upon that because that's censorship. By saying you will provide a real solution, it's almost as if you don't understand the depths of your decision as a policymaker. Right, you already said that. A city only has as much homelessness and crime as that city allows. Do you guys think that's true? Because I do. Thank you.
Last but not least, Mayor Blakespear, members of the council, everybody. My name is Peter Cole, and I'm a 13-and-a-half-year member of the Sheriff Senior Volunteer Patrol. That's why I'm here. What we do, for example, we check schools, parks, shopping centers, special events, vacation checks. We check in Llanas. We do a lot of traffic controls. And we do it for free. So we've been promised a 10% increase first of the year. But the problem is that 10 times 0 is still 0. So I'm hoping that the contract will be renewed because I don't want to lose my high-paying job. I have a couple comments on equity. To me, equity is a two-way street. Two examples. In 13-and-a-half years, there has been nobody from the Afro-American community or the Hispanic community applied to work with us. Why not? If they want to live in this city, they should be part of the community and work with us to do things for the community. If the members of the Equity Committee would like to know more how the Sheriff's Department works, or they have to go through channels, make an appointment through the captain, and do a ride-along. That way you can see what it's all about. A few years ago, I should mention, we don't do law enforcement. We do write tickets for people that violate handicapped parking spots. A few years ago, I was writing a ticket to a car parked in front of the AT&T store. And as I was finishing up, an Afro-American gentleman came out, said, "What the hell are you doing?" Said, "I'm writing a ticket. If you show me the placard, the permit that you can park there, I will void it." He had the audacity to say to me, "Just because I'm not white, you're picking on me." Well, we were taught at the academy to not be confrontational, so I kept my cool. The point is that sometimes to use saying we're being discriminated is just a way of taking the easy way out instead of working with us and the community. Thank you.
Mayor, that concludes the speakers.
Okay, thank you. So thank you again to the Sheriff's Department for coming and providing this really important information. Thank you to the public for coming and sharing your thoughts. I think, the topic of this meeting was our sheriff's contract, to understand more about it, to have questions answered, to be able to make statements so that the large number of data points that the sheriff receives throughout this county can be taken back, including those from Encinitas. This meeting really wasn't about the creation or formation of the Equity Committee, even though, several speakers spoke on that. I'll just say that the Equity Committee came out of a request to have an Equity Committee, just like many of our city commissions are responsive to the community. So we have Arts Commission, we have Environmental Commission, we have Traffic Commission. Those are all, we have Senior Commission, we have Youth Commission. The various committees and commissions we have are all formed in public. The Equity Committee was a unanimous decision by the council. We talked about it in public. There's no threat that the Equity Committee poses. The people who are on it were also chosen in public. People applied to be on it. So, it's handpicked in the way that every commission is, where the council, you've elected the council to choose the members of these commissions. This council who you elect is the one who makes decisions about the city. It's not the committees or commissions. But there is a lot of civic interest in this city, and we form committees to talk about issues that are important. They disband. Some of them go on to become commissions. And I'll just say that, I know that you have the right to stand up here and to berate me, to insult me, to demean me, to bait me, and that's all part of the First Amendment right that you have. And we see this at the Board of Supervisors, where I could be taking that for hours if that was the community that wanted to be that way here. And my hope is always that we can go back to recognizing that our democratic system relies upon having the ability to see the humanity in others and to trust each other. And if you don't like the policies, you don't like what you see from your electeds, that you work really hard to elect somebody else. But, we try to show each other respect when they're speaking. We show you respect. We're interested in hearing from you. I feel like we bring our best selves to this job. We try our best to serve the community. It might not be exactly in line with what you want, but to the extent you can lead with kindness and lead with mutual respect of others and lead with civility, we're all a better community. So I know that you have the right to say whatever you want to, but we do function better, and we are able to find our way toward a path if we can speak to each other as humans, heart to heart, instead of a sense of hate or feeling like such incredible anger that you really want to stand up there and berate me. So with that, I'll just say, I see my colleague, Councilmember Kranz, has his hand up, but I just want to say that it was important to me personally, as well as my colleagues, that we have this discussion in public, that we looked at it in a way that allowed the public to be involved with our sheriff's contract. I feel that we were able to do that, and I'm grateful, very grateful for the work of our sheriffs and for them coming to this meeting today and being willing to talk about it and take feedback. So with that, I'll call on my council colleague, Councilmember Kranz.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments and second them. But I wanted to first echo the sentiments of the several speakers who expressed thanks. The duties that you folks perform are critical and dangerous. And when I roll out of my bed and head down to my home office to manage printing projects, I don't have to worry about taking a bullet for anybody. So I appreciate very much what you do. All of our public safety personnel, fire and marine safety, just do incredible work. A couple of the other commenters used the phrase soft on crime and made reference to directives. And I wonder if, Captain Lopez, you could comment on whether you've been told to not enforce any particular laws.
I have not been talked to or been told to not enforce laws by city council or anyone else. I think that comment's coming from basically a national message, where the district attorney's offices, across the nation are deciding not to file on some crimes, or basically lessening on basically, violent crimes, or lessening the sentencing standards and stuff like that. There's been no one on the city council, nor the mayor or anybody else that's ever directed me anywhere, not to.
So maybe even deputies, as well as members of the public and council members, are frustrated by the fact that the district attorneys might not be presenting these cases, and makes your job a little harder?
It definitely, and there's a myriad of reasons, let's be honest. It's from COVID to, the overpopulation of the jails, to basically criminal justice reform. I tell everybody, this is a criminal justice system. It's not just, law enforcement that you see in the streets. You have courts, you have detentions. If there's a breakdown in the system anywhere, it reflects. So.
Thank you.
Councilmember Mosca.
Just to kind of follow up on that. So one of the examples that we heard in terms of soft on crime, that we're soft on crime, even though this city council has actually, over the last several years, increased the budget for law enforcement and focused more efforts in our downtown to make sure code enforcement was up to par, and that we didn't have people drinking excessively and that spilling over into our downtown, causing a myriad of issues, which I think actually has helped, and we passed some ordinances that helped in that regard as well. But just picking up on that, in terms of the one example that we had was that vehicles driving around that are unregistered. Have you ever received any direction from the city council to not go after vehicles that are driving on our streets that are unregistered?
No. I think that comment came from a comment that was made at a council meeting that I had heard. I'm believing, I don't know where that came from, but that's where I believe it came from.
From one of these same meetings, I'm sorry.
You can finish. Go ahead.
From one of the same meetings that we were talking about that we had a couple of years ago, at that time we had learned about how the sheriff's department responds to crimes, how they classify crimes, and how they respond to them in prioritization. Because you can't be, no matter how many people you have on the ground, you can't be in all places at one time. So you prioritize how you respond to crimes based on what you perceive and the department perceives to be the highest threat against the community. Can you maybe just briefly kind of highlight how you basically devote resources to crimes in our city, crime prevention and active crimes? Just because I think that also feeds into why maybe it's just perceived that people are driving without tags and are not being cited, but maybe it is happening. And at the moment, there's a bunch of other things going on. So maybe you can kind of just highlight, illuminate, how you go about putting resources.
I'll answer in one sentence. That's not going on. We enforce traffic like we always enforce traffic. There's laws in the books for the vehicle code. We enforce those. No one has told us not to enforce those. As far as prioritizing calls, we have a rating system through our comm center. It's a numbered system, 1 through 7, 1 being the highest priority call. That's lights and sirens. That's something that's, happening now when somebody needs assistance. It's preservation of life at that point in time. And then it just decreases from there, going through, basically if it's a report call or basically a suspicious person call. So a dispatcher would get that call in, and basically they would rate it by a number, and then they put it into a CAD-generated system, and then they get dispatched to the deputies that way.
All right. A couple of last comments. One other comment on community policing I wanted to come back to. Councilmember Kranz had mentioned the depot that we had, sheriff's depot that we had in downtown at one time, which is, I think, quintessentially another opportunity for community policing. And I'd like to work with you all to kind of really talk more about the principles of community policing and really get more of a focus on community policing in our city, so that we do, in essence, have people out on the beat and helping to prevent crime, getting to know the community to help prevent crime, and also investigating crimes that are happening. And so I'd love to continue to have that conversation.
That'd be great. Can I comment to that?
Sure.
I just wanted to say, as far as our community-oriented policing team, I think they're some of the finest in the county. They do a great job with liaison with the community. I know there's public speakers that have actually come up to me and said what, a good interaction they've had with those deputies. Those deputies are responding to basically the quality of life issues that we receive, numerous calls on. And I think they do a fantastic job. That's the homeless outreach team and those people. So I think they do a fantastic job as far as reducing the crime rate.
All right. And just one last comment. So you guys are the professionals in terms of law enforcement. And we're in the middle of negotiating this contract, or collectively with the 9 cities, we're negotiating this contract. And so I'm going to leave it to you to tell us the level of resources that we need to make sure that the city's safe. High on my list for me, the burglaries that are happening in our community, and want to make sure that we have whatever resources that we need. We've had a little bit of a spike, especially in the community of Alevienheim. I want to make sure that we have the resources that we can bring to bear on that. And whatever we need, I think this city council is open to hearing about it. Larcenies that sometimes occur, I want to make sure that we have whatever resources that we need. Traffic control, especially with the increased amount of cyclists in our roadways. Anything that, we're basically looking at that from several vantage points. One of them is education, but certainly working with law enforcement to make sure that we have that you have the resources that you need to make sure that our roads are as safe as possible. And also working with us on homelessness, making sure that we're basically walking down that fine line of how we're basically able to help folks that are homeless on our streets. And so I think those are some of the kind of overarching things that when the contract's being negotiated, what resources are needed for the city. I think that's one perspective, one city council member who thinks that's where we should be spending money, and that if there are other resources that are needed, that you would ask us for those resources and say, this is what we need to make sure those things are covered. So thank you for being here today. Thank you. This is, I think, the second time that you've presented on the contract, and I really appreciate you being here. Appreciate the services that you've given. I've always been very impressed with the captains, the 2 that are sitting there, and Captain Taft and Captain Marion, who have also been, during my time on the city council, very impressed with your willingness to talk about things that are happening in our community, to speak with members of the public, and just be out there and responsive to the needs of this community. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Councilmember Hensy.
Thank you. So yeah, I too just want to thank you for your high level of responsiveness you offer this community, this council, our city staff. Over the year, I think I've learned how to better cooperate with the services that you provide, and that included I think one member of your community-oriented policing joined us for assemblies that we put on about bike safety and e-bike safety at our junior highs, and that was a wonderful experience for me to meet Deputy Gary, I think was his name, but he was very helpful. And then also, I just want to reiterate the discussion that we've had here tonight. This city council is continuing to increase the sheriff's budget. Not at the same high levels as has been requested in years past, but it will still increase every year. And you heard it from our captain himself that he doesn't believe the solution to being more responsive to crime here in our city is increasing the number of deputies, but it's essentially in the way that we're able to collaborate, figure out what the issues are that our residents are facing, and allocate resources accordingly. So one example of that, and it was something we heard really clearly as decision makers 2 years ago in the forum with Sheriff Gore, was that it's not your job to respond to all the issues of homelessness and mental health that have increased over the years. You really want a different type of expertise. And that's why we have groups like the Equity Committee, like Robin, who has this professional experience, like Marlon, who is our first elected Black person here in the city of Encinitas that has a lived experience to tell us where we might not be seeing things because we've never experienced it in that way. And so by adding this Equity Committee, we're able to adjust and tailor where we allocate resources as a city to better result in quicker response times for our sheriff's department. So one example is the MCRTs, where we're recalibrating, reallocating, and another one, for example, that's maybe not to the same level, but short-term vacation rentals was something that in the past our sheriffs were having to respond to on nights and weekends because we didn't have code enforcement officers in place to do that. So instead of responding to a burglary or something that might be more high priority, they're responding to these quality of life issues, which really isn't their role and their duty to do. So the efforts of this city council over the last year have figured that out and allocated more night and weekend code enforcement officers to better respond to those issues during the summer when they are a problem for our residents. So I just wanted to make the point that our captain is not telling us we need more deputies. It's that we need to better understand what the challenges are for our residents and how to respond to that in our budget. So thank you so much. I look forward to continuing to improve our relationship. And I also want to thank Robin and Marlon and all the members of the Equity Committee who are willing to put yourselves out there in public and experience pushback and tension to stand up for what you know to be true and right. And I also want to thank the other members of the public who showed up here tonight, because I can tell that you wanted to express these beliefs and your lived experiences about your neighbors being robbed at night, or how you have interacted with our sheriff's department here. So I think overall this is a valuable discussion for all of us to have, and the opportunity to do so on a continuous basis is something I hope we can do in the future. You mentioned coming back in a year, letting us know how the MCRT is doing. I hope we can schedule that, and I hope this becomes part of our city culture where we're able to not have this item on consent, but to be a special item we can devote a full 2 hours to discussing. So that's all. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, everybody. And so with that, this meeting is adjourned, and we'll start our city council meeting in 5 minutes or so at 6. Thank you.